Someone just gave me this T-shirt, which I just love so much, I'm actually going to wear it in the privacy of my own home. Alberta, baby. What a great province this is. What a great country this is. In fact, I was just be told, I've never said this to anyone, including my wife, but I know that in Canada it's official policy that coming out of the closet is good, unless you're the Prime Minister. So I'm going to reveal something about myself that I've never revealed, which is that I am part Canadian. And yes, I am. I actually am part Canadian. And I was thinking this morning, I was like, I always say I'm the only American who's like legitimately interested in Canada, and I am. And I always have been. And I wonder, why am I so obsessed with Canada? And I thought, because I'm part Canadian. My great-grandfather, actually my father's family was in the colonies, and then they brought democracy, and they're like, we're out. We're going to Nova Scotia. And so they spent a couple hundred years there. The refuses, they're still there, by the way. I think they're all liberals. But and then my great-grandfather's like, I'm going to try that again. So he comes to the United States, and I'm here as a result. So I feel it. In me is Canadian. And I've been all over your country, and I've been everywhere in your country, and I just think it's a remarkable place. And I think people don't quite understand what Canada is because so much of it is bumped right up against our border. And I would argue, no offense, that the least impressive places in Canada are right up against our border. But once you get past that, it's just unbelievable. I've been to this city a lot because of your mountains, which I just find beyond belief, really the prettiest places I've ever been. This country is the prettiest country I've ever been in. The second biggest country in the world, bigger than the United States, deeper oil reserves than the United States, more natural resources than the United States, and 1/9 the population. And when I hear the lunatics that run your government are like, our population's growing, we're so excited. I'm like, really? You want to live in a crowded country? 40 million people in the world's second biggest country? That sounds like the kind of place I want to live. Like, what are you even talking about, you morons? But anyway, so I've come to Canada a lot, and every time I come, so many things strike me. First and foremost, the natural beauty, the unbelievable natural beauty, prettier than Switzerland, in my opinion. And the second thing I notice is the politeness of the people. That's real. And the third thing I notice is that all the comedians left decades ago. And it brings it out in me. And making fun of Canadians, and as I've already told you, and I hope it's obvious, is done with love. But I just can't control myself because no one will ever laugh at your joke. And so every time I go to Toronto, which I try not to do, but I do wind up there, every time I check in a hotel, I'm like, you guys have hot water? Like, where'd you get all the electricity? This is unbelievable. And they always have the same responses. We've had electricity for a long time, eh? Like, no, it's a joke. You don't really have sled dog parking in front. I know that. No, we haven't had sled dogs in a long time, eh? And so I just love it. I've told so many sled dog and Molson jokes, and I'll never stop. But one of the reasons I do it is because I do think it's important to laugh at your circumstances, not simply because it makes you feel better, though it does, but because it gives you perspective on them. And humor requires some distance, some critical distance, both from yourself and from your surroundings. And you can't really see things clearly until you have that. And so if you have a country where the funny people feel like they have to leave, that's a huge problem. And that's the first problem. The second problem is you can't really be effective as a political movement or a resistance movement, which effectively you are, if you don't laugh at your enemies. Because not only are they evil, and they are, they're also ludicrous. They're ludicrous. And it's really important to say that because it saps their power immediately. Laughing at somebody, and if you're a married man, you know that, no, it's true. Your wife could come and hit you in the face with a 2x4, and that would be less painful than having her laugh derisively at you, particularly when you get out of the shower. That would just end it for you. That would end it. Your male power would evaporate like a puddle on a hot day, like you'd be done, because it has that effect. And so to look at your enemies, like let's say you had some sort of weird prime minister like to dress up in fussy costumes. It would be super important to point that out a lot, like relentlessly. Somebody told me last night that his base, I was asked, we had this wonderful dinner last night with two of the most famous people in Canada, probably the two most famous people, Lord Black and my friend Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I asked, I asked, like, is there anyone in the country who supports this guy? He's so I mean, I know him I've never met him. I only know him through television. I know his cousin Gavin Newsom pretty well, but I don't know him. Is there anyone who takes him seriously? And everyone in the room said, oh, yeah. Young people, particularly young women, take him very seriously. They love him. And I thought, there's really only one way to combat that, and that's by pointing out what an absurd poser this guy is. He's like a ridiculous figure. Like, you should dislike and resist Justin Trudeau and his government to the maximum extent of your ability. But before you do that, you should just laugh at him until you can't breathe. Seriously. The guy's like, he's showing up for a costume party when no one else is. There's no costume party, and there's Justin Trudeau. Like, speaking as some sort of moral voice. Weird little cross-dresser. So anyway, that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice, once you've done that, which is very effective, and I know it's not the Canadian way because it's such a polite society that everyone feels morally bound to take everyone else's point of view very seriously and sort of nod gravely and pretend to consider their perspective. But there are some perspectives that aren't in fact perspectives, they're attacks on you. And that's the main thing that I want to say in the short time allotted today, is that you should recognize what is happening to you. This is not a political debate to which you've been invited to participate. This is a destruction of you and your culture and your beliefs and your children and your future as a country. And that's not overstatement. It's provable statistically. So just take 3 steps back. If you have a government that is giving fentanyl to your children, as they are in BC, I notice your premier has a no fentanyl to kids policy, God bless her. I know, and you're applauding. I mean, and I'm applauding, and I'm grateful. But how distorted is your world where you have to applaud the one politician's like, we're not going to give fentanyl to the kids today. Okay? But then take 2 steps further back from that and ask yourself, if someone's giving fentanyl to your children, what's kind of the message of that? Well, they're trying to kill your children, obviously. Fentanyl? It's the #1 cause of death under 40 in the United States. #1 in the whole country, followed by suicide. If you want to know where we are, we're about 2 years behind you. And it's only because we have a louder media space than you do that we aren't ahead of you. But if someone's giving fentanyl to your children without telling you, they're trying to kill your children, which are your inheritance, so the only meaningful thing you will ever produce on earth, okay, are your children. That's the first thing to know. Second, if they are trying to kill you, and by the way, I know I'm offending everyone, even this group, because no one in Canada wants to talk about anything. It's like an Episcopalian Christmas dinner. And I grew up in that world, so I know everyone's had like 3 too many, and then someone will blurt out, "You wrecked my childhood!" And then everyone will sit there in silence. It's so awesome. But Anglo-Canada, like Anglo everywhere, doesn't like to say anything out loud. But let me just do it anyway. If you're killing 50,000 of your citizens, if the government is doing that through the MAID program, and a lot of them are not actually terminally ill, they're just sad, and the government is encouraging them to submit to being killed by the government, and then won't release the recent statistics, like, what is that? What is that? Yeah, it's genocide. That's exactly what it is. It's killing large groups of people. And who are those people, by the way? We don't know, because your government hasn't released the stats. What percentage of those were born in Canada? I'd bet right around 100%. So if you're a government, you have the duty to your citizens, people who are from here, people whose ancestors built the place, not exclusively to them, but primarily to them, to your citizens. Like, why else do you exist except to serve your citizens? And if you're targeting your citizens, how many people who arrived in Canada in the last 10 years have opted into the MAID program? I don't know the answer. I'd bet around 0. It's all people who are from here. And now the government brags, oh, we're saving money because they died. That's the darkest thing I can imagine. I bet there's 0 conversation about that in this country, because I know this country and I know what it's like. It's too horrible. No one wants to talk about it. You should talk about it. But more than anything, you should internalize the message of that, which is they hate me. They hate me to the point they're willing to kill me, which they are. And the third thing is, notice the erosion of your most basic civil liberties, not the ones granted to you by the crown, but the ones granted to you by God. And those would include the freedom of speech, which is inalienable. It cannot be taken from you, no matter who is in Ottawa, or as we say, Ottawa, which, by the way, is the correct pronunciation according to my friends in the Ojibwa community. I've pronounced it that way every time on television. I get all these angry, you're pronouncing it incorrectly. You don't even know the name. It's like, yeah, I know a lot about Canada.